everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me as always are my fabulous co-hosts.
What up, what up, what up, what up? It's Jackie.
Hello, and it's me, Diana. Hi.
If I had an early morning show, that's how I would start
Yeah,
it.
I can believe it. That's not how my early morning sounds.
Yours would be like, shut up.
Yeah.
They sit there quietly, but I don't think she's here today. Maybe she shouldn't come to the show. But anyway, this isn't a podcast about your favorite drive time radio hour. This is a podcast about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research, where every week we pick a topic and discuss it at length, as well as some relevant research articles. And this week is a special week because it's a listener choice episode. We are doing an episode on a topic chosen from a list that we gave to our patrons, and our patrons chose behavioral artistry, which is a topic I was very excited to talk about. I found an article on this, actually one of our articles a couple of years back, and I said, this is going in the pocket. We got to bring this one out on the poll. And our listeners said, yes, please do so.
They answered your call.
They answered the call. Call to action. Please vote for this. So we're going to be talking all about behavioral artistry, including what it is, because I'm sure a lot of people read that title on their podcast feed and say, what are they going to even talk about? Like, that's not a thing. And it is, but it is not a well-researched thing. It is one of those topics that kind of, I think, similar to last quarter's listener choice, where we talked about quality in ABA, that we sort of all assumed we knew what it was until you looked at the research and realized, oh, no one's actually defined these terms. No one's actually looked at research related to this topic. It's sort of just been an assumption. So we're going to get a little bit into what's assumed, what's known, and what should we do next. So, Diana, what are the articles we will be discussing on this episode?
We have 4 articles to review today. The first one is where this term all started from, which was Foxx, 1985, the Jack Tizzard Memorial Lecture, Decreasing Behaviours, Clinical, Ethical, and Environmental Issues. And that was initially a talk, but then published in Australia and New Zealand Journal of Developmental Disabilities.
Everyone's favorite journal.
This article title also has 2 colons in it, which might be...
Whoa, that's too much.
It's definitely noteworthy.
It may not. Really, the way it was printed on the article, I just was like, this feels like 2 colons. However, I didn't see 2 colons. I'm just doing my best, folks.
All right. Also, behavioral artistry, examining the relationship between the interpersonal skills and effective practice repertoires of applied behavior analysis practitioners. That was by a whole bunch of people, including Callahan, Foxx, Swarzinski, Ertz, Mehta, McComb, Nichols, Segal, Donald, and Sharma. And that was published in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders, 2019. Also, Developing Procedures to Improve Therapist-Child Rapport in Early Intervention by Lugo, King, Lamphere, and McArdle. And that was published in Behavior Analysis and Practice, 2017. And finally, Training Behavior Technicians to Become Behavior Artists Through the Teaching Interaction Procedure by Buchspan, Anderson, Moon, Kaplan, and Leaf. And that was in Behavioral Interventions 2023.
I love that.
Thank you so much.
So originally, this episode was really going to be focused on the Callahan and then kind of the Leaf and Colleagues article. Callahan being the first article where I saw the term behavioral artistry defined. And by defined, they just repeated what Foxx said back in 1985. And Lugo was kind of an afterthought article. I thought we didn't really need it. And then the original Foxx article, as much as we liked,
Not that it's not good.
No.
It's
It just sometimes you like these feel like they
that's
fit.
called a
and
gravy.
You read them.
It's a gravy article.
Yeah,
remember?
Well, I think this is extra gravy.
Delicious.
I think it's be extra sass, a frass.
I always vote for extra gravy.
So, and then we thought, well, if we can't get the Foxx article, because there's been a couple times Foxx has posted on the idea of behavioral artistry in various journals that no longer exist or maybe never existed, like ghost articles. But we were able to find the 85 original, and boy, am I glad we did. So if you are a listener who says, I've never heard the term behavioral artistry, maybe just read the Callahan and the Leaf and Colleagues, and that's kind of fun. And just to get a sense of like generally what it is, what did Foxx call it? How might we use it in the future? And you'll probably be pretty happy. However, I think if you go back, I don't know if I'd recommend reading the original Foxx 1985. I'll talk about why in a little bit. And I'm not sure if the Lugo totally fits into what we're talking about in terms of behavioral artistry, but I think brings up some points that are going to be really important for dissemination stations. So I don't think this is a first. We've done this before, but we don't do it that often. I want that Lugo that's actually going to be a dissemination station article. Like I'm going to bring it up then because realistically, it's not that long an article. It says some interesting things, nothing too surprising. Spoiler alert, BST sure does work, right? So we're going to come back to that because I think it plays into the larger discussion of what behavioral artistry is and how we as behavior analysts should view behavioral artistry as a skill that we should be working on improving in ourselves and in the staff that we work with.
I wish my last name was Lugo.
Jackie Lugo.
Actually, that works really well for Jackie Lugo.
Doesn't it?
Sounds cool.
Robert
I
Lugo
know.
actually sounds pretty good too.
It does. I feel just sad that
Diana Lugo.
no.
Ooh.
I'm just kidding.
It could be worse.
Could be
I
worse.
like it.
That's not who we are, though. Did we do introductions?
That's not
I'm
who we are.
I think we did.
blanking
Yeah,
on
we
this
already
weekend.
did.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're good.
All right. So why don't we start? I'm going to start with the Foxx article, the Jack Tizzard Memorial Lecture, which is the article where the term behavioral artistry was coined. And it discusses the 7 skills that go into what Foxx would consider the behavioral artist versus the behavior technologist, which is kind of the alternative. And I do want to say to folks, if you are like, I want to read all the articles that they're talking about on the show, I like to dig deep into the original, source of an article. I don't know how much you want to do that with this article because it reads very old and out of date.
There's a little bit of a better updated one, Foxx 1988 article.
And that I could not find.
I couldn't find it either, but according to all these articles, they like that one better.
Yes.
So
again, I think if you're reading this one, you really have to be putting on I wonder what an older person in the 80s who's been, had their career in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, how they'd refer to different groups and such. It's probably not using terms that you would find really as respectful as you would expect. So it's a little iffy. And I don't think it was... It's
times
product of
have
its time.
changed.
Context have
this was
changed.
40 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyone writing then, if they're still writing now, I would like to think they've likely updated their language that they're using. Certainly our journals have.
Yes.
But I know what you're saying. So it's not just the language. It's sort of some of those ideas that are underpinning it that you found.
And considering that I'm one of the older people in the field, I guess nowadays.
You oldie.
We're all kind of the older people in the field to some extent.
I'm not
either.
For me to read an article and then be like, I mostly spent the articles thinking like, ooh, some of these terms are making me feel so uncomfortable. I think you're going to miss the point of the article potentially. So you may want to look at the more modern
You know what? That's
articles.
why we're here.
That's why we're here. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. So in any case, this, again, in some ways is a very cool idea, though. So like the central idea is there. It is very solid. And I think it plays on the idea that many of us have had of why is it that it seems like some behavior analysts are so good at supporting clients and affecting behavior change, and some just kind of they're like there. Like they're not bad, but they're missing something. There's like an X factor. I see this a lot in schools where you sort of give people that instruction you think is going to be easy of like, oh, just play with the child for the first hour. And then we'll talk about some, things you can work on. And you watch them an hour later and the child is clearly like, please take this person away from me. I want nothing to do with them. And you're like, how could you have screwed up in 1 hour where your only instruction was play with child? But some people just don't quite get the interaction piece. Like, what are they missing? And I think this article and the articles we'll be discussing really captures that kind of, how do we define that term other than like, they just got it, which is not a very useful term in terms of then supporting people and learning what it is.
Or when someone gives you feedback, like, I'm just not sure you have it.
Yeah, you just don't have it.
You just don't have it, right? Like,
She's
sorry.
got the look.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I've seen people, I've heard students say like, oh, my supervisor just said that I don't have what it takes, but they can't describe it. And that's not helpful for improving if you actually want to be in the field.
Yeah.
No. There's
And
nothing
the other can be opposite too, where like you have a new BT and they sit down with a student and you're like, they've got it. Like I can teach all of the terminology and protocols that they need, but like they have the essence of what it means to do this type of work. It's beautiful when that happens. Yeah. But trying to like capture how you're going to describe it and how you might try to like imbue it into others is really challenging.
Yeah. Or those folks you work with and, after like a month of working with them, you're telling everyone, listen, don't count on them being in their current role right now. They're going to be a clinical director. They're going to be, doing so many amazing things.
This
like 4
kid's
years
going
from
places.
now. This kid's going places. Yeah. Exactly. So I think this article really puts into words that it factor. So, and to be honest, I think there is something, even though there were some parts of the article that distracted me in terms of some of the dated language and my perception of tone, I think there's something about behavioral artistry that Foxx gets at in this article that is really missing in the later articles, that does what I think Foxx doesn't want us to do, which is, how do we break this down into a technology and how do we define it so that we can train these skills? But I'm going to save some of that till the dissemination station, because otherwise we won't get through more than one article. So what is the behavioral artist? And again, this starts as a general discussion, and there's a lot in this article other than just behavioral artistry, but the key components are, man, why does it seem like we have individuals come up with these amazing behavioral programs for individuals with disabilities, and then you come back to them a year later and they've all gone, they've gone to pot. They're terrible. Like, nothing's happening. All the things you worked on, all the skills the client learned, it's all gone. Like, why is that? Some people just seem to understand behavior analysis and implement amazing programs, and some people don't. And here are the reasons Foxx thinks that might be. These are the kind of it factor pieces that make you be a behavioral artist versus a behavioral technologist. Skill number 1 is having a bizarre sense of humor. And that check. So that gets into, do you realize how kind of like silly human services are? How bizarre the idea of changing behavior is, how weird your boss is, how strange some of the things your client wants to do are. But hey, you know what? They're an individual. They have rights. Let's do it. Hey, my boss is asking for bizarre things. Whatever. That's human services. You kind of have that humor that lets you allow many of the frustrations of the job to roll off your back, versus the obstructionist, who would be people, I'm sure we've all worked with these people, who you're like, what about this crazy idea? And you're kind of saying it with like a wink, like, I don't know, we're going to do something to help out. Maybe this will be fun. Let's give this a shot. It's not going to hurt anyone. I think it'll be a fun idea. And they're like, yes, we can't do that, or it's never going to work. And he just sees them as being just miserable human beings. So Foxx kind of breaks it down to, if you're a behavior technologist, you're just awful to be around.
But that might not be the most behavioral perspective that he's taking here. But I did like that he said these people were weaned on a pickle.
Yes.
So they just have a sour expression all the time.
To some extent,
I hope he giggled when he wrote that.
I bet he did.
I think of it as like, if we really wanted to define it more in terms of like mental health terminology, I think of some of the ACT terminology, behavior self, and sort of being able to sort of step outside of yourself and sort of observe the observing self, right? You're probably pretty good at those skills. So you have a bizarre sense of humor. Like, this is a little wacky what I'm doing here. Number 2.
You can't take yourself too seriously.
No, don't take yourself too seriously. Well, that comes back later.
Sorry, you're right. It does.
So does that one.
Don't bunch them in.
Okay.
I mean, we can maybe, but number 2, liking people. We work with individuals often who have not asked for our services, especially if you work with young children in schools. However, we need to be aware that just because they didn't hire us doesn't mean we need to be paying attention to who they are as people, paying attention to details about them, because there are lots of subtle cues you can give off that I shouldn't have to be here, or my job is not important, or this person doesn't deserve my full attention. And it can result in a lot of maladaptive behavior. And the people who just come in and they seem like, I am here to help, I'm really happy to be here no matter what happens. Again, I'm kind of going into another skill. I'm really excited to see people, to see what they do. I care about them. But people who like people, and this term is going to come back up in our future research, just tend to be better at working with individuals. Probably because, again, they tend to become reinforcers for a lot of behavior, and they probably are very good at many of the other skills that we're just about to talk to. What do you think? Liking people? That's a good one. Everyone should like people. Yeah.
And in the 1998 article, according to my article, they said that they specifically want to facilitate positive change.
Yeah.
So, like, if they like people and they want to do good.
Great. Which is a buffer against burnout.
Yeah. Super buffer.
Number 3, perceptive sensitivity, which is in quotes because it's sort of another made-up term that comes. This is the problem. Is some of this article does have a lot of kind of made-up terms.
I am okay with this.
So then this is the idea that you are able to look at micro behavior, that you're able to notice, not just by looking at your graph and looking at your data trends, but by looking at moment-to-moment behavioral interactions, that you are able to notice that things are working, things aren't working, even if your data aren't pointing to significant change. So he gives an example of a young boy who engages in SIB, and you're working on like a functional communication program, and noticing the moment where the boy pauses for a second before engaging in SIB, almost as if I was about to do my FCER, but then I didn't. I did SIB. That's more important to some extent than, well, how many FCRs per hour? Like, what's the rate of FCR? Because when you're able to notice those things, you're able to make momentary changes. You're able to respond quickly. So that perceptive sensitivity. And I think we see this a lot with folks who seem really good at a lot of like the PFA methodology. Like they just get working with individuals. They get, oh, they're seeming upset. Better back off. Trauma-informed care, I think, really can play into it. So I think you do see this with folks who kind of get the little things.
Absolutely. And it ties into the shaping is an art kind of mindset as well. It's not that there aren't rules that you're using to interact with folks and make like the social decisions that you need to make. It's just that those decisions are hinged on really small, often, perceptions and changes in someone else's behavior. And you do have to be fairly in tune to that to be able to respond to it.
Yeah. Number 4 is not liking
Or shape it.
to lose. Not liking to lose is number 4. With the cringy edition in the 85 article, quote, especially to individuals who are not as intellectually proficient, end quote. Yee. So I think let's not
don't
focus
like that.
on that part.
Yes, we don't
but
like
let's
that
focus
wording.
on the idea of not giving up, really not wanting to just say, well, this is the way the world is. This is the way the behavior is and will be forever. And there's absolutely nothing we can do. But really focusing on how can we affect change. And that sometimes might mean thinking of things that aren't readily available, which means you might need additional supports, you might need different environments, right? But there's other pieces in there. And Foxx does talk about the idea of, environments and working with individuals who engage in challenging behavior in certain settings, just not always working the way you'd want. So let's focus more on that, just not wanting to give up, really, rather than not liking to. Is a really great anecdote where he craps on the team process. But again, it ends a little cringy, so I'm not going to bring up that example. But just the idea that behavior can change, behavior will change with the right environment. You just need to figure out what it is that needs to change. And usually it's the environment, not the individual. Anything in the individual is doing necessarily. You can't directly change them.
Now he might use the term ableist to describe having a lower expectation for someone with an intellectual disability, which is what he's getting at here, that we should not do that.
Yes.
But he maybe didn't have that language to use.
Yes. Number 5, going through life looking for the pony, which the later article is defined as optimism, which I think it is.
Okay. So, yeah. Do you want to talk about it?
No, you can. Go ahead.
So one of our professors in grad school, Dr. Dan Gould, would always talk about looking for the pony. And
Are you going to share the?
Yeah.
I really hate this anecdote.
Oh, I love it.
Oh,
do you want to share it?
so
No, you can.
The imagery makes me want to throw up. It's really gross.
So the anecdote, I don't know why you don't like it, but that's okay. The anecdote is, I think a little girl comes into a room and sees a big pile of manure, right? And immediately starts trying to dig through the pile of manure. And her dad comes in. I don't know. Maybe they're in a barn. Her dad comes in.
No, it's the house.
It's the
He
house.
did specifically say house.
Okay. Her dad comes in and he says, honey, what are you doing? She says, well, with this much poop, there must be a pony hidden in here.
Yeah, I would be worried about my child to think that the horse has pooped itself into a corner.
I wouldn't be worried
But
at all.
I never knew the origin of the anecdote. Did you?
No.
I don't think it's Fox's anecdote. It must be like older. I think it predates this article. It's just one in 1985 that everyone in Australia and New Zealand must have known, I guess.
I was going to look it up.
Okay.
Girl finds poop.
Good luck.
Oh,
I don't know.
You're not going to
So-
get good articles.
This is great. I just want, when I put girl finds poop into Google, it's like in Subway sandwich
Oh, no.
with a possum.
No.
No. Okay.
We're getting off track
Sorry.
with that one.
But Dr. Gould was using it in reference to a big pile of data is how we would talk about it, right? So you have a big pile of raw data, and it's so exciting to sift through that pile of raw data because inside you will find the pony, which is the piece of raw data that you're looking for.
I couldn't find it. I only found some hilarious videos of a girl who actually brought her horse inside. So
Well, in any case, it's being optimistic. Programming will be successful. You just need to keep at it until you find how it becomes successful for the individual. Number 6, which again is probably, I think, is more reflected as, don't take things personally or sort of have a professional detachment for problem behaviors or challenging behavior. But Foxx refers to it as the mafioso characteristic, which basically boils down to the idea that problem behavior is just business. Like if you watch The Godfather and they're killing people all the time and it's like, how could you kill these people? It's just, it's just business. We're in the business of murder, I suppose. But in this case, it's just the business of working with individuals who engage in problematic and interfering behavior. And it is not anything related to you. It's just something that is occurring for a reason. There is a function and you will figure it out. But you shouldn't be upset about it. There's a kind of gross quote. I'm not going to quote it. You can feel free to read it yourself. But really just the idea that you need to, this quote I do like, quote, relates to clients in a manner different from most of the people the clients have ever met by being more consistent and persistent. That's an error in the text. Others. You like the client, but treating their maladaptive behavior is strictly business. So again, you like them, you want to see them succeed. And when there is a problem or something that happens to you in terms of problem behavior, it is not anything you should take personally.
They call it, in this 1998 article, thick-skinned.
Yes. I don't know if... Yeah, okay. I would not categorize it as thick-skinned quite the same way. I think it is just more about your professionalism, which...
No, they said, doesn't take negative client actions towards herself or himself personally, maintains objectivity and positivity.
And then finally, being self-actualized, meaning you know what's important to you, and what's important to you is probably helping people and doing good work and using your knowledge of behavior analysis to save the world. And your audience is not the people who are watching you do this, meaning if you're engaged with a client in a way that the client is enjoying and is supporting the acquisition of new skills, don't worry about other people. It reminds me of a time way back when I was still a level 2 teacher. And I was working with a student, and I was being very fun and animated. The student was having a good time, and someone came over and told me, "Could you please be quiet?" I think they were trying to do a video model or film sign. I don't know, something was going on, and I was told pretty much to shut up. And I remember at the time being young, thinking "Oh, I must have done something wrong." But reading this, I did kind of go back and say, "No, I was 100% right, and whoever told me to be quiet probably was wrong. Maybe they're not a behavioral artist, unlike myself, because I don't care what other people think as long as the client is happy. I don't really care about my audience. I don't care what they're thinking about me."
You know what I love? That you're still thinking about this one thing that happened 30 years ago.
It was not 30. It was not 30 years ago. It was probably 19 or 20 years ago. All that matters is I find being right as my primary reinforcer, even all that time ago.
I do think when it says they're not concerned about what others think when they're trying to change clients' behavior, we should probably caveat that, because more recently with the idea of televisability, right? We do want others, if they were watching us attempt to change behavior, to be okay with the approach that we were taking.
Yes.
Right.
It's not a carte blanche. I don't care that the cops are coming to tell me to stop doing the thing I'm doing. I think it's right. Yeah. It's not.
Yeah.
You can't do whatever you want. It has to be in the pursuit of supporting the individual that you are working with. And within that context, don't worry if people are the way you're playing is weird, or, the idea of how you did that reinforcement schedule, I don't know if that's the right one because I don't like it. That's not important. Not as important as meaningful results for the individual you support.
And if the individual likes it.
That's the thing is this is assuming that you have nailed it perfectly. You've gotten all of the things that your client likes and you're doing it exactly the right way and you're teaching the right things.
I mean, I think of times when I've come up with programs where, I'm doing a shaping step that just feels kind of odd. Or the first time I started instructing people to do in vivo probes for certain social skills, and they were saying no, that's dumb. I'm just going to do it once or twice. And I bet they know it. And I don't need to take data and I don't need to set up environments. And just knowing I don't care if you think that's extraneous. I'm going to do it because I think the student doesn't know how to do the skill. And I need a means of practicing with them in real life so that there's generality to the skill. And over the years, people more and more realizing that is how you support the generality of those skills. and not caring that I had so much pushback of like, that's a giant waste of time. Who cares? I think they can do it. And just knowing that, not that I was right, but no, like, well, this is what the research shows. This is what the student has benefited from. I have data to support it. The student seems happy to know this skill when they didn't know it before. They seem miserable when we're not working on that. And I don't care that everyone says this is a giant waste of time. I'm going to do it anyway. That kind of situation. And again, it does have that fine line. You're right of, when are you just doing something because you want to be right? And when are you doing something because it's important to do, even if not everyone agrees, because not everyone will agree with meaningful behavior change. But, the phrase I like at the end of this section is the idea of the quote, "You cannot effectively change someone else's behavior until you have done a fairly good job dealing with your own. In the process, you will have figured out who you are, what you want, where you are going, and why."
Man, that doesn't put you down a spiral if you really think about that one.
So at the end of the day, when we talk about behavioral artistry, I think Foxx is not against the idea that we can train this skill, but the idea that we may be better off finding individuals who just do these things already and then trying to convince them to become behavior analysts rather than making every behavior analyst do this. And if we were, I think he sees problem solving more generally, or kind of global problem solving, as the means with which you would support the development of behavioral artistry in your behavioral technologists, which I think is a little different than some of our future articles will be, though perhaps not. He doesn't really get then into like, what are the solutions to it? He sort of just keeps talking about other reasons that programs fail. And, he kind of goes off on other topics and tangents for the rest of the article.
I'm wondering if when he wrote this, he had recently read Skinner, because Skinner has a whole article on ethics and the treatment of, they call it the retardee, right? Because that was in like the 60s when he wrote it. But a lot of the same things that Skinner says here, like, yeah, it would be better if we didn't have to teach these skills, but find those people. Like if you're going to make a culture, make sure that you find the people that are engaging and loving and sympathetic and that are already doing that. So then you don't have to teach it. It saves you time. Yeah. So when you were talking about it, I just got some full Skinner vibes. So I'm wondering if Foxx was like, I'm going to reconceptualize this article from Skinner.
Maybe.
And
there's also the idea, too, that he says that when you find people who do these skills, when they're introduced to the science of behavior, they tend to be the people that are like, oh, my behavior analysis, this is the way. They just, this fits with how I've lived my life so far. I don't know if that necessarily means that everyone who really got into like, I can't wait to be a BCBA is necessarily going to have these 7 skills, but that certainly describes sort of how I saw much of, when I was learning about behavior analysis. It's like, yeah, this makes sense. Of course.
Spoiler alert.
This is how to do it.
If you read my article.
I did.
Spoiler alert.
So those are the parts of behavioral artistry. Really quick, having a bizarre sense of humor, liking people, perceptive sensitivity, not liking to lose, or, being somewhat persistent, going through life looking for the pony, being optimistic, the mafioso characteristic, being thick-skinned, being professional about problem behavior, and being self-actualized, sort of knowing what are your reinforcers, and they probably are helping people and seeing people succeed. So with that out of the way, let's take a little break. And when we come back, we'll talk about, okay, if you can do these things, you're awesome. But what if you can't? We'll be right back.
Do you want to be a BCBA?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Mass. to get your graduate degree.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education.
Dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster's certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years. And our 2017 grads had a 100% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy practicum placement support, ethics mini handbooks, PhD-level professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland.
If interested, don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu, regiscollege.edu. One more time,
www.regiscollege.edu. See you there!
And we are back talking all about behavioral artistry. But before we do that, I want to remind our listeners that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved. And by listening, you're able to earn 1 learning credit. And if you are a patron at the $5 and up level on our Patreon, you are able to learn this credit for free. More on that at the end of the episode. But no matter who you are, we're so glad you're listening to this episode. And we want to make sure you get your first secret code word. And it is je ne sais quoi. You can do this as multiple words, or you can do this as one big bunch of letters. I'll tell you the letters right now. JENESAISQUOI. Je ne sais quoi. The French for I don't know what. Yes. Is the literal translation, but it's like that's special something. Just like the episode.
Right.
Je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi. Let's all do our best French. Je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi. I'm taking French on Duolingo.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Is that any good?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll come back
Al
to
is so proud of you.
All right.
Je ne sais quoi.
And let's continue on with the episode. So when we last left off, we talked about our 7 characteristics that make up the behavioral artist, at least according to Foxx. And now let's talk about some later articles that discuss, okay, well, what do we do as a field? Because clearly not everyone we've worked with is a behavioral artist. I didn't actually start. I didn't know if it would be too presumptuous of us all. Like we could sit around and say, do we think we're behavioral artists? And then we'd probably all either be too modest and be like, I don't know if I am. Or we'd be like, I totally am, and then brag about it. So I felt like it would put us in a weird situation. So I think we all do some of these things, just having, known you all and worked with you all for so many years. There's some that I'm sure we do better than others. So I'd like to think that we're on the right path. And I think we can leave it there unless anyone wants to really brag.
Nope. I think that's good.
Nailed it. All right. So let's move on to folks who clearly are not
No
behavioral
Cosmo
artists
quiz.
according to their supervisors, because not everyone is able to do these skills naturally. So let's go on. Let's talk about the Callahan article, which is the first place I saw the term behavioral artistry.
Also written by Foxx too.
Yes.
Just later on in the 2019. So he's second author. So I bet this is one of his students at Penn State. But, so this article, they asked so many questions. Do I think they answered all of the questions? They answered them all, yes. But do I think they answered them fully? No. But what I do love is that they had so many questions and they did have some answers for all of them. So that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
They used a lot of group design and math, which is great because we don't typically use group design and math. And there is obviously some limitations. So let's go forward. The one thing I wanted to add that this introduction adds from your article, Rob, is that the term behavioral artistry really aligns well with therapeutic alliance, which we have talked about in previous episodes, how other fields like psychology and counseling really try to promote therapeutic alliance where there's a collaboration and you're being empathetic. And so they said that this really aligns with that. They also said that in the special ed field and education, they have an empathetic teaching methodology that really aligns with this.
I think one of the challenges with these terms is you can define them and define them and define them. And it just, they do still seem somewhat ineffable in terms of like, what do these mean? And so I do worry. I think they did a nice job in this article, sort of combining how these terms are, behavioral artistry is kind of a synonym for therapeutic alliance, which is kind of a synonym for like empathetic teaching or empathetic behavior. But I do think there is always a danger when you just try to conflate different terms from different fields into one term that works for all.
And I don't think they were doing that.
No. But
right.
I think it makes it challenging, and I think as both of the articles you'll be discussing look at, it then becomes a game of, okay, what's the closest we can get to this? And you sort of feel like you're just lobbing shells of like, let's get close to this, but is this really what we're talking about here?
Yeah. So anyway, so they say that it's very similar, to that. And Tristan Smith, who I do love, they had noted that he said that some behavior analysts are really great technology, but they lack the more personal side, which makes really good ABA. And so really what they wanted to do was to evaluate Foxx's idea of behavioral artistry and to demonstrate whether people working in the field of ABA are different from those personality-wise from other fields. And they used occupational therapy, they used special ed, they used speech and language pathologies. They had a comparison group of computer science majors and engineering students who didn't pursue a human organizational field.
I love that.
They wanted to look at that. They also wanted to look at the social validity of behavioral artistry with parents, whether parents would view these characteristics as agreeable or not. They wanted to look at the effectiveness of treatment with two groups of people, some people that had high behavioral artistry characteristics according to the survey that we're going to talk about, and some that had low levels. And so, yeah, they asked a lot of questions.
It was a busy article.
It was a busy article. So, the methods they used, they looked around. They're like, should we, I like that they put this in there, should we create our own to assess these 16 or to assess the artistry factors, or can we find something that's kind of similar? And so they said, okay, we found something similar. It's called the 16th Personality Factor 5th edition questionnaire. And they gave you a whole lot of information about that, which you don't really need, I don't think, for the purposes of this, but it aligned pretty closely to Foxx's assessment. That personality assessment questionnaire has 185 multiple choice questions that ask participants about their daily interests, their daily behaviors, their daily thoughts and opinions, and it takes about 30 minutes to complete. And there were 16 different personalities on it, so I'm going to give you them: warmth, emotional stability, dominance, liveliness, rule consciousness, social boldness, sensitivity, vigilance, abstractedness, privateness, apprehension, openness to change, self-reliance, perfectionism, and tension. And then with these 16 factors, I only mentioned 15 here because the 16th, reasoning, they took out because it was looking at intelligence and it said that wasn't a great one. And so with these, we'll say 15 factors, they had two polls. One where the skill was definitely shown, like for instance, warmth. The behavioral artistry poll would be warm, outgoing, attentive to others. And then along the continuum, there'd be the other side where they're looking at reserved, interpersonal, and distance. And that would be considered the non-behavioral artistry poll. So you're asking all these questions, and then they pop you into each of these categories, and they say where you fall on this continuum. Another thing that the artist did is that they said, are both of the polls compatible as behavioral artistry? And so like warmth would not be, right? Because warm and reserved might be different, but like rule consciousness, oh no, not that one. Yes, rule consciousness, rule conscious, dutiful, expedient, and non-conforming may be both ends of the spectrum. So they added that in there as well. And so you're taking these personality tests, and then they had 38 experts across the United States that rated which polls would align with the Foxx assessment. Warmth, liveliness, and perfectionism had 100% agreement, and all the others had strong agreement. So that's great. And then I said they used math to support their reasoning to pick the ones that they did, because the math is important in here. They did it. It's great, but we don't really need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Math. So then what they did is they chose the polls that were associated with parental behavioral artistry. So they said, okay, most people thought warm, outgoing, attentive to others was part of that. And Foxx said yes. Emotionally stable, adaptive, mature, that would align with that thick skin. So they found, a few that matched what the parents said versus match what Foxx has said. So that's what they eventually used. Mm-hmm. And what they found with the parents is that they had 86 parents of ASD children complete the survey, and they could pick from the table one that I told you, and they gave definitions. They didn't say like warmth, right? They're like, the person does these things, and they can choose yes or no if that happened. So yeah, so they did that. Then they also had ABA students take the survey. They had students from other fields take the survey, and then they had that comparison group of engineering students and computer science students take the survey. They characterized the general idea of what each of the students said and had a mean score, and then they had a combined group score. They had an autism center group, so the people that worked at the autism center, ABA students, and others. It's like occupational therapy and speech and language. Those were part of the autism group. That was confusing for me for a little bit. And then a non-autism center group, right? And then, no, they're not done yet.
But wait, there's
more. So then they had therapists observe students that completed the questionnaire, and they divided them into scoring a higher level of behavioral artistry and lower level of behavioral artistry. And then they had them examine what their treatment looked like between groups. So they only could rate likes people on the Foxx score because that's the only one that they saw. And they have a whole entire section about that, but it's not really that necessary. But they operationally defined what likes people meant, and they did partial interview on whether they saw likes people or didn't.
Yeah. And then we'll come back to that as one of the challenges of teaching behavioral artistry. It's like, that's the only one you can teach.
Right.
There's still 6 others that might be important.
But they said they just didn't see them.
Yeah.
Like it's only a 10-minute observation period, right? Across discrete trial instruction and naturalistic teaching. So these are the only that you'll see within a brief period. And then they also did a qualitative score, or how well do you think you displayed liking people according to the definition? So they did that. They videotaped them 6 times. I love this part. 3 of the first videos did not count. They were just there to squash reactivity. Mm-hmm. They only scored the last 3 videos. Then they did a pairwise comparison to see if they found anything, right? So that's a lot.
T-test.
That's a lot, right? They also, this is the last one that they looked at. They also looked at behavioral technology and whether people actually ran what they were supposed to run.
Oh,
Yes.
right.
Boom. They tried to do a lot.
They sure did.
I always appreciate an article that's like, let's answer all the questions. But then sometimes I get to the end of those articles and say, maybe if you just picked like 2 questions, you would have given me more to jump off of next. I think there's a lot to go from this one, but it definitely was so busy. So much
busy.
going on.
Yeah, it was a lot. So that
I don't want to crap on anyone for working really hard on a very complicated
hard,
topic.
Right?
It's like the picture of Charlie Day with the red string, right? Where he's like drawing all the theories, like trying to connect everything together. Yeah.
It's like find a murder. It's like trying to find a murder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're like, you want to take this language and this language and this language and tie it all together. And it all actually means the same thing. Or does it?
Yeah. Right. Okay. So 80% of the parents preferred behavioral artistry characteristics over non-behavioral artistry characteristics.
Okay.
So you got some social validity.
That was
around
easy.
Behavioral artistry.
That was the easiest one, right? And
Like
now
you could have just made a paper on that.
they actually could have.
Yeah.
Yep.
Callahan's going, I can read like 7 papers on this thing.
I can't believe
Whatever I won.
They're not an academic, maybe. Just kidding.
No, I think they are.
They probably are. I was just joking, right? Because if they're an academic, they want to like pull out all of their results so that they have more on their CV. I was just being a
maybe
jerk.
they were new
Yeah.
at the time. Now looking back.
Maybe like, oh, gosh.
oh,
I
man.
think
Okay. So they had 212 students that took the survey, right? Across a variety of majors. There was applied behavior analysis, special education, rehabilitation counseling, other human services, and non-human services. They had undergraduate students. They had graduate students. They had people that worked at this autism center at the university, all of which were all those things. And then they had people that did not work at the autism center, right? But also were all of those things. So that was confusing to me. I had to read that over a few times. And then I looked at the table 3 and then I was like, okay, I get it now. Okay. So then what they looked at is the surveys. Everyone did the survey and then they looked at, okay, who had the best percentage of behavioral artistry characteristics by major area of study? So applied behavior analysis combined with both external and autism center had 42.6%. Okay. And that's really bad. It was the lowest out of all of the other majors, with the highest being special education at 54.4%. And, non-human services actually had 39.6%. So they were low, but we expected them to be low because they don't work in
they're the
human
control
services.
group.
They're
like,
the control
they're
group.
picking
Right.
careers where they mostly are working on like solving problems and then maybe working in probably working in teams, but they don't need to do human service work.
Right. Yep. So that happened. So we were a little bit sad
So were
there.
you surprised?
Yes and no. So let me tell you. yes, because I do think we really want to help people in our field. And I think we come in because we care. And that's what I always hear, right? But no, because unfortunately, I think sometimes as a field, we teach that out because we focus so much more on the technology and what we're doing versus how we're doing it that I think sometimes we lose that feeling. So yes and no. How about you?
I think that it makes sense. Initially, I was kind of surprised. And then the more I thought about it, I think that it might make sense for the same reasons, or it may be self-selecting, the folks that, come into behavior analysis.
Right.
I think there's a reason that everyone always wants to do DTT, and you have to convince everyone to do NET.
Because it's easier.
It's hard to do NET, and it's hard to do the things that are listed here because you have to be on all the time, right? And it's absolutely for the benefit of the client to be able to exhibit all these behavioral artistry behaviors, but it doesn't always come easy to folks. And so if, like you're saying, if in the past it hasn't really been, touted as like the main focus of what we're doing, and it's more, there are more rote aspects of like what working with clients might look like, then you could have a mechanism in place that selects toward a group that's more comfortable doing the rote stuff than the artistry stuff. So I guess I'm not like overly surprised.
No, I was yes and no, right? And then the two things that they said were statistically different from other groups with the ABA group was warmth and perfectionism. And so the ABA students had a 4.4 and all the other students had above 5 and 6. The non-human services had 4.19. So we're real close in warmth to those engineering, but also we're a science. So maybe that's also right. People love the science of the field and maybe haven't learned quite the...
It's correlational, but it does explain how we have so many articles written about like, why do people hate behavior analysts? Or like, why, so much of our training is on identify the problem, tell everyone the answer to the problem, pat yourself on the back, and then move on to the next problem, when that's not necessarily how this field began, but that is how the field is mostly funded now. So you have to be good at analyzing behavior, but you don't necessarily have to be, in terms of where the money comes from, good at working with people. Right. Because you're in demand, whether you're good or whether you're good to work with or not, unfortunately. So yeah, it's not too surprising, but it is very sad to think that we aren't good at the skill that has behavioral in its name.
Right. But
we named it that.
We named it
that. Well, the parents prefer it.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to see if the clients prefer it.
Right.
That didn't we don't have that information. I mean,
so
I think
the 80 questions Callahan and group answered, they missed 81. So shame on you all.
Future research.
Try harder next time.
No. So, but when they looked, I think we did better when we looked at the observations, actually, to be honest. So when you're looking at like the students or the people that displayed high behavioral artistry versus low behavioral artistry, right? The high behavioral artistry was characterized as 6 or more of the characteristics on Foxx. Nobody got all of them. And then the low behavioral artistry was 2 or less. And I think all the people got 2 is what they said. So the only one that's like vastly different is pleasant facial expression. So the people with high behavioral artistry had 31.27 statistical significance, whereas the low behavior artistry only had 15. But everything else, if you're looking at positive tone of voice, sustained gaze, body position, and orientation, all of those are pretty high. So they look very similar across the high and low behavioral artistry. And the subjective ratings are not that different, right? With the high behavioral artistry getting a 78 and the low behavioral artistry getting a 71. And so remember
that's not that different.
That's not that different, right?
And it is very subjective.
Super subjective, objective, which is one limitation, is that even though they didn't tell the raters what they were looking for, like who was in the group of what group, I wonder if they could tell, right? But maybe not. Who knows?
Probably.
But yeah, so they also looked between males and they looked at gender, and there really wasn't much there for gender. So it was,
I mean,
nothing else
anecdotally,
there.
I wouldn't think
no.
so based on my experience.
No gender and no experience, really. There was actually...
Either you got it or you don't.
Well, yeah, right? It's not...
To some extent, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think so reading this article, right, we have a lot of information, but not a lot to go for. Like, we don't know how to teach it now. We don't know what to teach, right? We know that we might be lacking, but what exactly are we lacking and how we teach it? That's not really answered in this survey, because this is probably a preliminary pilot, right? He's like, I'm gonna dust off my behavioral artistry article, and now we're in the 2000s, so it's time to do something different. But I think we need to talk more about, now, what do we do with this article? Now, how can we use technology to teach this? How can we do need to, I think, operationally define all of these assessments or these characteristics, provide assessments and treatment for staff. I think that's our next step. They say there's like a ton of limitations here, of course, because it is survey research. But I think if you look about how we can talk about the definition of what effective treatment is, and not just doing everything correctly, but doing everything correctly with a certain affect, right, might help improve not only our treatment outcomes, but also our acceptability in mainstream.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of training these somewhat not always clearly defined and somewhat subjective skills, we know them when we see them, and parents clearly know them when they see them, at least according to this research. But if we wanted to teach individuals to engage in behavioral artistry, is it possible? So let's go to the present, 2024, Bookspan, Anderson, Moon, Kaplan, and Leaf. Let's talk about training behavioral technicians to become behavioral artists through the teaching interactive procedure.
By the way, I want to go into a room full of like scientists and be like, hello, my name is Jacqueline McDonald. I'm a behavioral artist.
Yeah.
So I hope we can make a micro credential for that, because I would totes get it.
I would very much like someone to watch me and be like, that guy is
He's
or
a
is not a behavioral
yes.
I'd like them to say is a behavioral artist. I don't want the is not.
Yeah.
But,
Right?
like, they get it.
Yeah. I just want that. I want that for
I
myself.
wouldn't expect you to do some trapeze work, probably.
I could.
If you
I made
told
a
me that
picture
you were a
of myself.
behavioral artist.
I would paint.
I would expect.
I did an oil painting of myself
like a
doing
performance.
discrete trial training. It's great
Hey,
behavioral art.
can I tell you something? All my sessions are art.
Yeah.
Performance art.
All right, so Diana, let's go through this one.
Okay.
I think the techniques and technology. We talked a little bit about the tips and how it's different than BST, so we can talk a little bit about that. But just in interest of time, let's focus on the
I'm going to
definitions.
move quickly through
what
this.
they had. Yeah,
Not because it's not interesting, just because we've covered some of the important components of it already.
if I see anything that's like using tips or using BST, I sort of like I know the conclusion. This article got published. I'm pretty sure I know what the results are going to be.
BST work.
Actually, these results are kind of interesting.
Okay.
So we will talk about those in a minute. But these authors want to make sure we know the 6 areas of behavioral artistry as
They
put
cut it
forward by
down.
Foxx in 1985. And they renamed a couple of them, as we've already noted. Things such as noticing and celebrating small successes has replaced finding the pony. And
So sad.
No,
oh no, did I say
perceptive
the wrong one?
sensitivity.
Yeah.
that was perceptive sensitivity.
Yeah.
So sorry. Is optimistic has replaced finding the pony.
Looking.
Great that we know what these are. How can we figure out how to teach them? Which is absolutely the next research question one should be asking. So that's what they embarked upon here. And yes, they talked about BST and then they said, we're going to use TIP, which is a teaching interaction procedure. This group kind of puts forward. It's quite similar to BST.
Man, I do not like TIP.
No?
No.
Did they use any other procedures?
What? No, I like the procedures. I do not like the acronym.
TIP.
Hey, man, I use TIP. It just sounds...
Yeah.
I think I will just think of too many jokes and I will just keep laughing. I'm like laughing right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but they're
I tried to cue you up for one. Yeah.
No, we're not doing that. So there's several studies out there. You can go and check out the teaching interaction procedure components, but I'll tell you what they are right now. There are 5. 1, labeling the target response.
What about the showing interactive procedure? The SIPs.
2, providing a meaningful rationale for that response. 3, providing a description of the response. 4, demonstrating the response with role play. And 5, providing feedback. Okay?
And the difference is really
Okay.
just that there's a meaningful
They
rationale.
add the meaningful rationale.
Which we've added with BST.
Yeah.
You know, and the most recent description is that you make it as part of the written description and rationale.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
just
that's
gonna be
mostly
a
the
curmudgeon
difference.
and say these are all BST. I refuse to use tips.
It's fine. But
Just
those are the components.
That was queuing you up for.
Sorry, Diana.
They had basically 3 participants in this study. They say like, oh, we had the child participants, but there was no modification attempts on their behavior. They were just there to receive the services that were being provided by the 3 behavior therapist participants who were the main focus here. They were all women. They were aged 22 to 45. They were all RBTs, and they really didn't have previous experience with ABA. One of them had been involved for like 2 months. But what they wanted to do for these BTs is identify and then ideally teach some components of behavioral artistry. Now, you really can't like try to grapple with all 6 or 7 of them at once. So they picked a few that they felt were representative of some of the important components here. And the 3 behaviors they were looking at were providing attention, possessing a pleasant tone of voice, which possessing is a weird choice.
I have it. I just didn't use it in the study, but I do possess it.
I have one. I possess it.
back
Yeah. And 3, engaging in a lighthearted exchange.
I'm like imagining Snow White singing me a song with that lighthearted exchange.
But I went ahead and just grabbed it right from the article so I can tell you what the definitions
Thank
of these
you.
were.
Okay.
Because to me, that's what's so interesting about these types of studies is, yeah, I get it, right? Like, I feel like we've painted a nice picture of what behavioral artistry is, but we can't just leave it at, you know it when you see it, right? Instead, you have to figure out how you're going to define it. So I just love studies that try to tackle these challenging things to define, because often they're not actually undefinable. It's just a matter of finding like what are those small perceptive sensitivity and nuances that you have to pick up on in order to define the behavior that in turn is demonstrating your perceptive nuance. Okay, so providing attention, this is straight from the article, was defined as any instance in which the participant's body was positioned toward the learner or engaged in play with a shared item with the learner or engaged in imaginary play with the learner. And I'm sure secondary to that, there was a definition for imaginary play. Possessing a pleasant tone of voice was defined as any instance in which the participant engaged in a verbal exchange with the learner in a way, a differentiation in tone and pitch was defined. Differentiation in pitch was noted as any comment or directive of higher pitch than the participant's daily vocal admissions. Not emissions, though.
No, an admission.
Oh, okay. Similarly, differentiation in tone was identified by a fluctuation of the participant's manner of speaking toward the child from flat directive to a sing-song presentation of a teaching task. A pleasant tone also included the production of an auxiliary auditory stimuli to enhance the teaching interactions. I continue to not know what that part means.
Nope. It's fine. We'll have to just keep moving forward.
Engaging in a lighthearted exchange was measured as any instance in which the participant raised their eyebrows, nodded, or smiled during the teaching interaction with the learner. Okay, so that's how they're defining these. So they're really just working on that like initial interaction positivity piece. So this is like just one like tiny sliver, I feel, of the whole behavioral artistry pie.
Yeah.
But you definitely want to start somewhere. And I'm glad they didn't try to tackle too much at once, because even this piece was kind of a lot, it turned out.
Yeah. It's kind of the liking people.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the liking people piece. So they did the sessions with the child participants who were all aged 3 to 4 and had diagnoses of autism in probes. So those were the naturalistic probes that they conducted. They were 10-minute teaching sessions, and they were each organized around an NET type of session, but it had some goal to it, and they had a table of them. And so some of them were like, let's play, and it was like a play-based activity, and some of them were do what I do, and it would be like a gross motor imitation activity, etc. So that this was contextualized into what a typical session might look like for the learner. And then for the BT, during those naturalistic probes, they were taking baseline of how well did they do across all of these skills. Then they did intervention, where they used the teaching interaction procedure to teach the skills. And after they taught it, they did maintenance, which was the same as the baseline probe. They did boosters if it was needed, which was the same as the intervention. And they did this across a non-concurrent multiple baseline design across the 3 participants. So the sessions were broken into intervals, and they were just looking at percentage of intervals in which these 3 behaviors occurred to kind of help, I think, probably keep things simpler.
Yeah.
That's nice. I'm glad they did that and didn't try to do like second by second of each one of them, because that would have been a nightmare.
Ugh.
That would have been quite brutal. And also attempting to do a multiple baseline across these skills per participant, I think would have been quite hard, because I doubt that they are functionally independent from one another.
Smart. Good idea, Diana.
Thank you.
Ooh.
So the data, I know you guys were saying like, oh, BST, TIP, like we know what the data are going to look like. You don't always, because these data are a little more fluid than perhaps you might have anticipated. So everyone scored quite low in the baseline.
Which again, I was also surprised
Well, they were selected for this study.
because of that. I know,
Yeah.
but like really low.
0 to
We
20%
also are
of
in a field
intervals.
that is in high demand and
I know.
is increasingly
Like, how would you
hard
feel,
to
though,
find employees.
If
So-
you were Maxine, Sally, and Natalia, I would just feel sad that I wasn't doing any of these things.
Oh.
But anyway,
But they're getting trained.
Right.
Hey,
But
you know what?
they're getting
Right.
trained.
I would be
you know?
sadder if I were told you are no fun to be around, you're fired.
Yeah, you're
I would
right.
rather have not enough employees
You're right.
than work with you.
Okay.
Being, hey, we're going to work on the skill together. That's
yeah,
better.
You're right.
Yeah, there might be a lot of reasons why one wouldn't naturally do this.
Yeah, you're right.
So, yeah. And they may never have worked with little kids before. Some of them had daycare background, so that's not true.
No.
Anyway,
But they just didn't. They didn't like ask how they felt about being part of the study.
I'm going to tell you about that.
I know.
Okay, I'm almost done talking. The intervention was successful because everyone got up within the range that they were looking for. 80 to 100% of intervals by the end of the intervention had all 3 participants demonstrating these skills. However, what then happened in maintenance was a little bit of a different story. So one participant, Natalia, she maintained these skills in the maintenance sessions, which were just like baseline, beautifully. So this was highly effective for her. However, for Maxine and Sally, they both had decreases during the maintenance probes, not back to baseline levels, but definitely below the mastery criterion levels that they were looking for. For Maxine, they then had time to do the booster where they went back, but her levels never actually recovered back to the initial intervention. So there's
They're
some
better than
counter control.
Right. Do you know what I wish? I wish when they had a mastery level, they would put the dotted line so I could see it.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be nice.
Right? Just for these graphs, because
Yeah.
then you could like, right now I'm drawing an imaginary line with my finger to see, because it's kind of so little for all 3.
Mhm.
I would have liked the line to be there.
Okay, well, that is some good feedback from reviewer 4, Jackie McDonald. Post-publication reviewer.
Can we yank this one? Can we republish it?
Yeah, and they kind of just say like, yeah, we had some challenges with the maintenance of these skills, but don't go further into detail. I bet if you were there, it would be quite apparent what was going on. Like maybe this was really just, outside of what is going to end up being expected for these particular BTs. Like I was saying before, maybe there's like some weird counter control stuff going on. Like, you want me to smile? I'm not going to smile.
Hmm.
Right? Some women don't like being told to smile.
I don't.
Right?
And I'm
So-
usually smiling.
And it doesn't automatically mean that you're ineffective if you are not good at these skills.
We
Although
don't know.
what we are arguing is it contributes towards being an effective staff, right? Oh,
We don't know.
Everyone is making. I don't.
I think
We just don't know.
Everyone thinking I don't know.
Is there anything else in the study? Because I think we need to go to dissemination
They didn't do
station to
social
discuss
validity.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Hey, Maria, Sally, and Natalia, did you like being trained for being a grump that no one enjoys working with?
And then you continued being a
And then
grump.
you kind of never got better at it?
I just,
You did get better at it. You did.
But this is like one of the only studies that
No,
has
it's true.
attempted to teach these skills behaviorally.
Yes.
So it's okay that they didn't get perfect results. I'm glad they attempted it, and we need to do more of this. Maybe you're going to talk about that in dissemination
Well, let's
station.
go into dissemination station.
Okay.
Rob has been waiting for dissemination station since we
I
started.
put it in the notes in big letters. Okay. So I'm gonna break protocol a little. We usually dissemination station, we do a sum up. But I want to do a really quick review of Lugo et al. 2017. And by really quick, I mean very, very fast. Because at the end
Quick
of the
like
day,
a bunny.
this is a study in which they looked at pre-session pairing which they kind of conflated with the idea of therapist-child rapport, which is similar to the Callahan study, where is that the same as behavioral artistry? So originally when we had this in kind of the hopper of like, we should talk about this, we weren't sure because there are so few articles on behavioral artistry. We're like, well, we should have something similar to it. And this is related. So we did have this one. And it's one that I would have thrown out when we got the Foxx. We were able to find a copy of the Foxx 85 article to talk about.
Not thrown out, but
I wouldn't have
aside.
discussed it because we don't usually do 4 articles. However, I thought it brought up a point that I think really captures where we are with behavioral artistry. So the article itself, it does a nice job describing pre-session pairing, the idea of what are the steps in pre-session pairing, which we're sort of going to assume is the same as building a good therapist rapport with young children, which therefore could fall into the category of behavioral artistry. Maybe we're stretching a little bit. But in any case, pre-session pairing, if you don't know it, is when you kind of make yourself a reinforcer. And we had a whole article on it, a whole episode on it many, many years ago. And basically the steps are when you're interacting with an individual, you are in close proximity, you are praising behavior contingent on appropriate play skills, you're repeating client vocalizations, reflecting what they do, you're imitating appropriate play skills of the client, you're describing the appropriate play skills. These are all quotes on appropriate. I'll come back to that. You're initiating, offering tangible items to the client, and you're creating a new activity by changing the function of the toy. So you're just doing other stuff. So some of those skills do sound like they'd fall under some of the categories of behavioral artistry, maybe perceptive sensitivity. The client likes this, doesn't like this. Liking people certainly would fall under what we think of as pre-session pairing. They use BST. Guess what? BST taught all the skills to their technicians. Hooray, as we usually expect it to. So nothing too exciting there. And it almost wasn't going to make the cut for the episode. However, I did a thing that after you've had a show like ours, where we've done so many articles over the span of, how many years have we been doing the show? Almost 8? Almost 9? A long time. Almost 9 years. Sometimes I say, this article feels too familiar. I'm going to Google the article plus ABA Inside Track and see if an episode comes up. And I did. And it did not. We had never talked about Lugo 2017 before. We did our episode on pre-session pairing before 2017. But what did come up was a blog post called Confessions of a Previous ABA Technician, Part 2, The Problem with Pairing, by an SLP who used to be a behavior technician. This is at the Therapist Neurodiversity Collective. I will put a link in the show notes, which was, it's an anti-ABA blog. ABA is horrible to children and all this stuff. And my original thought was, I'm not going to read this article. This is wrong. Of course, this is a great thing. But I decided to practice, because I would like to continue practicing this, my behavior analyst humility. And I said, let me read this and see what is the function. Why was this article written? Why is someone so against the idea of pre-session pairing, which is one of those things that feels like a no-brainer, right? Play with kids. And there's a lot going on. Some of the points are related to the, to what we're talking about. Some aren't. So I'm just going to focus on the ones certainly that are. But really the idea of pairing as, that term appropriate, the way the Lugo article was written, pairing really resulted in, if the child is not playing as the therapist considers appropriate, you're not providing the reflection. You're not providing the praise. You're engaging in toys in the way that you as the therapist think the toys should be played with. And certainly many individuals in the neurodivergent community would say that might be very aversive to a young child. And that certainly is trying to normalize their behavior in a way that is not necessarily appropriate. So again, we've had many discussions about this. I didn't read Lugo thinking, oh, they're trying to make the child with autism feel bad about the way they play, and I certainly have seen, we've had episodes talking about play with individuals. We really try to play the way they want to play. And then we're not trying to leverage that, which is, again, what this blog went at. We're not really trying to leverage it in terms of, and now you'll be compliant because I'm a reinforcer. We're really just trying to make sure that they feel safe engaged with us. So when we try to, show that there are other ways to engage with the environment and engage with the world, that they might try it out and then help them decide if that's the way they want to engage with the world as much as possible. Not everyone can do whatever they want whenever they want to, but, again. I
mean, teachers are more effective when they have a connection with their student.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to say.
Yes. And to some extent, I think this blog went a little over the line, but in terms of like, is that what parents do when they try to do things with children? Is that what everyone does? I feel like everyone does that, right? So is that fair to poke at ABA? Anyway, the main point that I came away with this is the idea that an article that we thought about adding in, and we did add into our conversation about behavioral artistry, might actually not define what behavioral artistry is, which made me think really hard about, do we know enough about these terms? Do we know enough about what is important or is not important when we talk about behavioral artistry to be jumping to the gun of, and now let's write articles about how to train people in engaging in these skills? And I think as a field, we need to take a step back. I think, again, with Callahan, so much hard work. I love your article. At the same time, I almost wish you'd made 10 different articles on the subject, because I think we might be trying to put the cart before the horse in describing behavioral artistry as a series of skills that we can train our therapists and our young BCBAs, our next generation of BCBAs, to engage with when they're not already doing it. I don't want to make that sound like I'm not interested in training these skills, because they have a lot of kind of face validity, and they do have some social validity, as Callahan pointed out. But I think we need to do more work on defining them, defining what they are, what they aren't, and then looking at client social validity when these skills are practiced, not practiced, before we start assuming we know best how to train those skills in others, because I just don't think we do. So while I don't want the conclusion to this episode being you either have it or you don't, which is how we started, because that's very doom and gloom and makes it sound like we should be firing large swaths of BCBAs who are sorely needed because they just don't seem to have it. What is it? I'm not going to tell you. We don't really know.
You'll know when you see it.
You'll know when you see it, right? I do really want us to be thinking as a field about what is behavioral artistry? How do we know it? How are we defining it? How can we study it? And does it matter, before just assuming it sounds great and Foxx makes a good point as to why we should do this, therefore let's make sure everyone can do these skills that we haven't well defined. So I feel like it's a bit of a downer to an episode where I think we really love the idea of behavioral artistry, but I was really concerned after kind of thinking about it more that we just don't have a good enough handle on what the it is. And even the articles that purport to know what it is, I don't think they know enough to be like, and here's the training program that now we should all implement. And usually we end these episodes and we either don't know enough, we need more research, or we have a very clear, like, do this, it's going to be great. And this one almost felt like some folks are saying, do this, it's going to be great. And I'm scared if we just barged ahead and said, let's train these skills. Not scared. Dinah made a face. Not scared in the sense of, terrified for our field. But I want us to pause as a field and take a couple steps back before making any assumptions that we can train these. I think we can train these skills, but that we know how to train these skills tomorrow. Anyway, that's my dissemination station.
Rob's like, I'm out.
And I'm going to go home now, but I'm here.
I mean, I think that the list of skills, I agree with that list of skills, right? When I see like people that are really good in this field, they have that list of skills. But I also agree that it's hard to define what those are. An interesting question to me would be, which of these matter to our clients, right? Both in terms of their social validity perspective and in terms of effectiveness of teaching. Because while like we're still at the point of saying like, we think these are important, but who knows? And
who's the we in that conversation too?
What I'd love to know is how can you figure out like which clients and which BTs are going to be good matches for each other? Because some of these may matter in some situations and some may matter in others.
Yes.
Right?
Right. I have great positive affect. If anyone has met me in real life.
What? Really?
And I worked with one student who found my positive affect very unnerving. And every time I would work with him, he would punch me in the face. So I actually had to be trained to have a neutral affect, and I had to lower my voice like this. And I couldn't be excitable, and I had to be like, cool. Yes. Right? Because anytime I did what they did, right? Like, oh, be upbeat. He got very mad. And he only got very mad with me.
I would personally hate that.
You would hate
I would
me as
hate it if someone talked to me that way.
I thought it was being told to work differently with
No.
That
someone was
wrong.
like, Diana, hey, great job. I would not respond well to that.
You would not. No. I even changed my voice with Diana. Just kidding. But right, so I think that's important to think about, right? Because everyone's like, oh, you're going to do great. You're going to kill it. And then I was like, I'm being killed, right?
But
and
is the artistry knowing
knowing
that?
when the sensitivity,
That would be that,
right?
the percent
Right.
sensitivity.
Right.
So I didn't have it.
Yeah.
I didn't know it
So
then.
figuring out how to match up with that
Right.
client in a
Yeah.
way that like works for them. That's the artistry part.
Well,
That's
then think
the hard
about it.
part,
Liking
yeah.
people, as defined by in our last article, the I'm going to say the name wrong. Hold on. The Bookspan article, liking people, that sing-songy, that
Oh,
tone
yeah.
of voice. Again, they were working with younger clients, so
Right.
perhaps if they were working with different clientele, it would have been different.
Mhm.
But by their definition, they would have trained you to get punched in the face and to drive this client, crazy with your affect, but still going along with the principles of behavioral artistry as far as we know. So again, I think we all agree these skills sound right.
They sound
but
great.
That doesn't make them right.
I think we need idiosyncratic operational definitions.
Mhm.
That's what I'd like to say.
Yeah.
Yep. For each client, and ask the client what they prefer.
Or I think we could have some sort of like a gradient of like
Yeah.
people kind of looks like it could look like this to that. More examples, more non-examples.
Right.
And then, what is the social validity from the perspective of the client, not just the people who are paying for the service
Right.
potentially.
Great.
And finally, the last section of the show, pairings. Diana, take it away.
Hello, everyone. You are here to listen to Pairings, which is a section of the show where I tell you about other episodes you might want to check out if you thought this one was interesting. Now, I know we talked about how behavioral artistry is not the same as pairing, which this segment is named kind of for, tongue-in-cheek. But we did do some episodes related to these topics, and they include episode 6, where we talked about pre-session pairing with Dr. Amanda Kelly. So you could certainly go check that out in the way, way back machine. Episode 245, we talk about rapport building. So kind of another slight variation or take on this topic. I threw in episode 84. We talk about early intensive behavioral intervention, as that was a referenced here. Episode 205, Join the Big Four with Dr. Shala Alai Rosales. Episode 253, Setting Up Supervision Systems at Work with Kim Held. Remember that one, Rob, where we did like the kind of like a personality test
Yes.
and they told us what would be a good job for us? I felt like,
I was the maverick.
yes, Jackie's article kind of did something a little bit similar when looking at all these 16 different areas.
We can use personality tests in our field.
Yeah, right. And then finally, episode 287, which was compassionate care practices for supervisees. It was another approach on attempting to train some of these like ephemeral, hard to define skills. And that was with just me and Jackie. That's our Girl Squad episode. I also like to recommend a snack to go with your listening. And the snack today is two things that might not go together, or maybe they're a match made in heaven. You can decide. So they are birthday cake and pickles. Birthday cake because it is one of our son's birthdays today, and pickles because I just loved that Foxx quote about being weaned on a pickle. It just made me laugh. So I brought it back around.
Excellent.
Please enjoy.
Thank you, Diana. All right, behavioral artistry. A lot of fun. Really exciting. Listeners, you've been nailing it with the poll questions. I think this is our second one where we just had so many like fun think pieces to go beyond the articles. So thank you for choosing these. And thank you all so much for listening to ABA Inside Track. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to join in on the bandwagon of choosing an episode that we do every season, why not go to patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, where for $5 and up, you're able to vote on our episodes and gain access to the video feed, the raw, unedited video feed, which comes with a special bonus code on that post so that you can get 100% discount on the CE for this episode. CE for this episode, you say? Yes, CE for this episode. You need a second secret code word? Well, let me give that to you. It's certain something, CERTAINSOMETHING. That's certain something we've been talking about this whole episode. Certain something. Well, we all hope you enjoyed our episode on behavioral artistry. If you want more ABA Inside Track, you can subscribe to the show, leave us a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you find us. You can go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, to find links to all of these articles, as well as to our previous episodes and links to purchase CEs. You can find us also on Patreon, patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, where you can join at the whatever level you like to, but certainly at the $5 level, you can get free CEs for these listener choice episodes. At the $10 level, you can join our our book clubs, where we had just released our episode on supervision, discipline without punishment. We have another one coming up on the science of consequences this winter. So you have that to look forward to, as well as all of our previous book clubs. You get them a year ahead of time, as well as free CEs. Again, that's patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. And you can also find us on all the social medias or at abainsidetrack@gmail.com if you want to share your definitions of behavioral artistry. And finally, some big thank yous. Thank you to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro-outro music, Kyle Sturry for our interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
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 Was that sing-songy enough? Bye.
See ya.